Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro arrived in Iran as part of his Eurasian tour. In Argentina, tens of thousands of demonstrators marched in Buenos Aires on Thursday to demand decent and better paid jobs, and in rejection of the adjustment plan demanded by the International Monetary Fund. And Somalia's newly elected president, Hassan Sheik Mohamud, used his inauguration speech to appeal to the diaspora and international community to help stave off the famine that threatens his drought-stricken country. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro arrived in Iran as part of his Eurasian tour. After his visit to Turkey and Algeria, President Maduro arrived on Friday at Tehran, Iran's capital. The Venezuelan president was received by top officials of that Persian nation and is expected as part of his agenda that Maduro meet with the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei, Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi, and also to visit the historical complex of Zad Bab. After his arrival at Tehran, President Nicolas Maduro offered an interview to Iranian news media channel Ispan TV. Maduro addressed several topics, that's to say, international conflicts and geopolitical moves. The mandatory referred to the U.S. sanctions against Venezuela and Iran in an attempt to suffocate both people by means of detriment of their livelihoods, economy, and well-being. Maduro also said that Venezuela has a prosperous energy reserve, which has the oil and gasoline that the world needs. Maduro also referred to the 9th Summit of the Americas, an event hosted by the U.S. and that excluded Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Cuba, but stressed Argentina's President Alberto Fernandez was their advocate in that summit. He also addressed the Palestinian issue and the struggle that nation had to sustain face Israel's aggressions. He also said that cooperation between Venezuela and Iran is key to overturn global hegemonic powers. During his visit to Algeria, Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro visited places of high historical value for the Algerian people. President Maduro laid a wreath at the Monument of the Martyrs in order to pay tribute to the heroes who fought for the independence of Algeria, which is one of the most representative elements of the city of Algiers and visible from any point of the city. Likewise, accompanied by the Algerian Minister of Energy, he also visited the Museum of the Revolution, a historical space that exhibits a vast collection of articles related to the War of Independence of the North African country. Upon leaving the premises, the Venezuelan president signed the visitor's book in which he admired the heroism of the Algerian people and saluted the strong ties that exist between Venezuela and Algeria. The governments of Venezuela and Algeria decided to relaunch the high-level joint commission with the purpose of strengthening bilateral relations. During a shared press conference, Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro described as extraordinary the meeting with his counterpart, Algeria's President Abdelmadjid Tebboune. In the meeting held in Algiers, the head of state shared their positions on world geopolitical issues such as Palestine, the situation of the Sahrawi people, Libya, and the construction of a multipolar world. Regarding bilateral relations, the dignitaries discussed oil, gas, agriculture, science, technology, and university education. Maduro pointed out that from this moment on, the relations between both nations enter a new phase, which will promote the union and prosperity of both peoples. President Maduro announced the upcoming activation of air connections between both capitals.
Very soon, Venezuelans and Algerians will be able to get on a plane and go to Caracas on a direct flight. Get on a plane and come from Caracas to Algeria on a direct flight. Very soon we will have a direct air connection from North Africa to the north of South America, from Algeria to Venezuela.
For his part, the president of Algeria, Abdelmajid Tebboune, informed during the press conference the opening of an airline between Algiers and Caracas.
We have discussed together many cultural and economic issues and dossiers on the international scene of Algeria and Venezuela, as well as at the international level. We have also decided to open next month an airline between Algiers and Caracas.
And TeleSUR expands its signal with new satellite parameters. Since more than ever, the world connects to us and our stories are being heard in other farther away nations. These parameters are in place since June 1st in Latin America and the Caribbean, both in English and in Spanish, and quite soon further changes will be implemented for the signals in Europe, the Middle East and Africa. This new multi-platform will continue providing truthful content to oppose the hegemonic media's narrative and our faithfulness to our audience. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back from the South. In Argentina, tens of thousands of demonstrators marched in Buenos Aires on Thursday to demand decent and better paid jobs and in rejection of the adjustment plan demanded by the International Monetary Fund. The demonstrators were protesting the agreement reached by the administration of President Alberto Fernandez last March, when it was forced to refinance a debt of about $44 billion with the IMF, a loan that had been requested by former President Mauricio Macri. The IMF, based in Washington, is demanded from the Argentinian executive to implement a series of adjustments to the state's public investment in exchange for preventing the South American country from defaulting. On its part, the government maintains that the agreement will not require any revision of the pension system or labor regulations, although it will imply a price increase for gas, electricity, and other public services. The House panel investigating the January 6 deadly riot at the United States Capitol laid the blame firmly on Donald Trump, saying the assault was hardly spontaneous but an attempted coup and a direct result of the defeated president's efforts to overturn the 2020 election. The panel, also known as Congressional Committee, is led by Representative Benny Thompson. It was created to provide a comprehensive account of not only the January 6 events, but the coordinated, multi-step effort to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. With a shocking new accounting of the worst attack on the halls of Congress in more than 2 centuries, the committee outlined in gripping detail over the course of 2 hours on Thursday night the grave threat posed to American democracy, then and now, by the former president's actions. In the United States, the Summit of the Americas takes place in the middle of criticism from several delegations due to the exclusion policy imposed by the White House. On Thursday, the high-level segment began, in which several leaders of the region have already participated, including Joe Biden of the United States, Laurentino Cortizo of Panama, and Mario Abdo Benitez of Paraguay. The president of Argentina, Alberto Fernandez, also appeared during the day, representing the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, raising the main concerns of the region. Argentina's head of state and CELAC's pro-tempore president, Alberto Fernandez, criticized the U.S. blockade against Cuba and Washington's sanctions on Venezuela during his speech at the Summit of the Americas, which is being held in the U.S. city of Los Angeles.
Of people are trapped and mired in poverty. From the sidelines where we are placed, Latin America and the Caribbean are pained to see the suffering of our brother and sister countries. Cuba is bearing an embargo that is over 6 decades old, imposed during the years of the Cold War, and Venezuela is bearing another, while a pandemic that is hitting humanity hard is taking with it millions of lives. With measures of this type, the idea is to put conditions on governments, but in fact, it only hurts people. We definitely would have wished for a different Summit of the Americas. The silence of those who are absent is called.
During his speech at the Summit of the Americas, the Prime Minister of Belize, John Antonio Briceño, expressed his regret about the exclusion of several countries from the summit.
The summit belongs to all of the Americas. It is therefore inexcusable that all countries of the Americas are not here, and the power of the summit diminished by their absence. It is incomprehensible that we would isolate countries of the Americas which have provided strong leadership and contributed to the hemisphere on the critical issues of our times. Cuba has provided consistent, unmatched cooperation in health to almost two-thirds of the countries in this hemisphere, including Belize. The illegal blockade against Cuba is an affront to humanity. In fact, it is un-American. The time has come, Mr. President, to lift the blockade and to build bonds of friendship with the people of Cuba. Similarly, Venezuela has done so much towards energy security for the Caribbean region through its innovative financing programs. Venezuela's absence is unforgivable.
In the same line, Briceño recalled some words of the liberator Simón Bolívar about the need of the Latin American people's unity.
As we work this 9th Summit of the Americas, let us call to mind the words of El Libertador Simón Bolívar. En la unidad de nuestras naciones descansa.
In the unity of our nations rests the glorious future of our peoples.
Nations rest the glorious future of our peoples. Thank you very much.
The Foreign Minister of Bolivia, Rogelio Mayra, declared that it was necessary to review the dialogue in the continent in the context of the policy of exclusion practiced at the Summit of the Americas.
Our message here is that we need to review the dialogue in our continent. The conversation between the countries in this hemisphere, in our land. Unfortunately, we come from an institutional construction that has been tailored to the superpower that we have as a neighbor.
In addition to the role played by the Organization of the American States, the OAS, during the coup d'etat suffered by Bolivia in 2019, the Foreign Minister mentioned the lack of clarity in the request made by his country for information on the matter.
We will continue to insist. And to be clear, we have 10 formal requests to Almagro, to this OAS of Almagro, so that he can show us this information. And so far, he has not done it. Let us say that this is not exactly a demonstration of democratic or transparent conduct. But unfortunately, this is how this OAS of our days is. And it is the evident and clear proof that things have to change.
And we have more news coming up after a final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back. Somalia's newly elected president, Hassan Sheik Mohamud, used his inauguration speech to appeal to the diaspora and the international community to help stave off the famine that threatens his drought-stricken country. Various heads of state of neighboring countries attended the ceremony held under heavy security in the Mogadishu airport complex. Aid agencies The United States and the Chinese defense ministers held their first face-to-face talks in Singapore on Friday as both nations battle over security disputes ranging from Taiwan to contested waters. The relationship between the two countries has deteriorated due to several issues in recent years. As well as Taiwan and the South China Sea, they have clashed over cybersecurity and alleged human rights violations in Hong Kong and Xinjiang. U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin met his Chinese counterpart on the sidelines of the Shangri-La Dialogue Summit, which brings together security officials from around the world. Austin is the latest senior U.S. official to visit Asia as Washington seeks to shift its foreign policy focus back to the region from the Ukraine crisis. The Secretary General of Lebanon's Hezbollah resistance movement said the resistance will not remain silent in the face of the Israeli regime's efforts to plunder the country's maritime gas resources. Sayed Hassan Nasrallah made the remarks after a vessel operated by the Greek company arrived at the Karish gas field in Lebanon's territorial waters to extract gas from the occupying regime. Nasrallah also said that the United States and Israel are seeking to afflict Lebanon with hunger and partition. The Lebanese companies have pioneered to extract the maritime area's resources have been threatened by the U.S. and Israel. Although it has not been officially announced, the U.S. is employing the so-called Caesar or the Kaiser Act against Lebanon, aimed at choking off revenue sources for the Syrian government. The act was enacted on June 2020 and have crippled the country's economy by prohibiting foreign companies from trading with Damascus. And to cope with the influx of asylum seekers arriving from Minsk to the European Union, Poland is building a 5-meter-high wall on its border with Belarus. According to the Polish border guards, the construction will be completed by the end of June and will be equipped with cameras and electronic sensors.
The wall stretches for more than 180 kilometers along the land border between Poland and Belarus and is 5.50 meters high. Every wall can be crossed as long as you have the necessary tools. The Belarusian authorities have these tools, so we have to be constantly alert and the wall has to be constantly inspected.
There are always possibilities even to cross a wall. A determined person will always try and there is always a chance to succeed. But for the moment the wall seems to be effective and the cameras and surveillance tools are installed, it will become very difficult to cross the border.
So we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. And before our farewells, we say goodbye with the song Es Nuestra América, It's Our America, performed by Mayito Rivera with Alexander José Gil Domínguez, Hijo del Sur, and Aquiles Rengif.
Somos gigantes, nadie se rinde, vamos para arriba, esa tierra es tuya y también es mía. Pueblo mestizo, guerrero y solidario, aquí nadie es extraño, aquí somos hermanos.